Hey guys, tonight we slip into the world of ancient Egypt, where scents drift like whispers through dusty temples and royal chambers. You're standing in a courtyard bathed in the soft golden glow of dawn, the air thick with the mingling aromas of crushed flowers, fragrant resins, and smoldering incense. Imagine yourself watching a perfumer at work, calm, precise, surrounded by small jars of mysterious powders and oils. Now, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments, because wherever you are, it's time to relax and unwind. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You probably won't survive this, by the way, not in the sense of perfume making itself, but as an ancient Egyptian. Life was tough, and sometimes the scents you loved had very practical reasons behind them. But more on that later. Perfume making in ancient Egypt began as a sacred art, a craft closely tied to religious practice and royal ceremony. The earliest evidence points to the early dynastic period, around 3000 BCE, when priests and craftsmen were already blending aromatic substances for gods and kings. The Egyptians believed that pleasing scents could bridge the earthly and divine worlds, acting almost like a perfume-laced prayer. For them, perfume was not just a luxury but a spiritual necessity, worn during rituals and placed in tombs to accompany the dead into the afterlife. In fact, some of the oldest perfume recipes are etched on alabaster jars discovered in tombs, revealing surprisingly complex mixtures of flowers, herbs, and resins. Historians still argue whether these scents were mostly symbolic or used widely by the general population, but the clear association with temples and palaces suggests they held deep ceremonial importance. Picture a workshop bathed in warm sunlight, filtering through narrow windows, with tables cluttered by clay pots, mortar and pestles, and piles of fragrant leaves. Craftsmen, often called shemsu, meso, worked in teams, their noses finely tuned to balance the bitter, sweet, and spicy. Their knowledge was passed down orally and guarded jealously, much like a secret recipe for the perfect cake, but with less sugar and more myrrh. The Egyptians used the Nile's bounty and traded goods from distant lands to gather the essential raw materials. Frankincense from the Arabian Peninsula, blue lotus from the Nile's banks, and cinnamon from faraway Asia all were ingredients that made their way into those early blends. It's funny to think that while today's luxury perfumes come in flashy bottles, back then, the real value was in the careful combination and the story woven into each scent. So next time you spritz your cologne or dab on perfume, remember that this fragrant tradition stretches back thousands of years, from sacred temples to the bustling workshops of ancient Egypt. You find yourself stepping into a lush garden beside the Nile, where the air is heavy with the scent of blooming flowers and sticky resin. This is where the story of perfume really begins, among the raw materials that ancient Egyptians treasured for their magical aromas. It wasn't just about picking any old flower. The perfumers hunted down very specific plants and natural substances, some native, others imported from distant lands. You can almost feel the rough texture of frankincense tears and the delicate petals of blue lotus between your fingers. One of the most prized ingredients was myrrh, a reddish-brown resin collected from thorny bushes in what is now Somalia and Ethiopia. Imagine caravans crossing harsh deserts, hauling these precious resin lumps, while traders whispered about their healing powers and intoxicating fragrance. Egyptians believed that myrrh could purify the air and even protect the dead in their journey to the afterlife. Frankincense, another resin, was equally coveted. It came from trees in the Arabian Peninsula, its smoke curling upwards in temple rituals, carrying prayers on aromatic waves. Scholars still argue whether ancient perfumers favored one resin over another for different ceremonies, or simply mixed them freely to craft unique scents. Locally, the Nile marshes offered the delicate blue lotus, which you might know from those dreamy paintings of Egyptian gods lounging by the river. The flower scent was described as sweet, slightly fruity, and somewhat hypnotic. No wonder it made its way into many perfume blends. You might smile knowing the blue lotus was also associated with mild intoxication and relaxation, Perhaps early Egyptians were unwinding with a floral cocktail of sorts. But it wasn't just flowers and resins. Cinnamon and cassia, spices native to Asia, traveled incredible distances along the ancient trade routes to reach Egypt's markets. These warm, spicy aromas added depth and complexity to perfumes, turning simple mixtures into sensual experiences. You could say that ancient Egyptian perfumes were a sort of globalized fragrance before globalization was even a thing. Interestingly, some perfumers used animal-derived ingredients, such as castoreum from beaver glands and musk, lending a mysterious depth to their concoctions. Don't worry, no crocodile dung yet, that quirky ingredient comes later. But trust me, it's worth waiting for. Collecting these materials wasn't always easy. The timing of harvests, weather, and political relations affected availability, making some scents rare treasures. The Nile's cycles dictated when certain plants bloomed, while trade depended on safe passage through dangerous routes. Perfume makers had to be patient, almost like sommelier, waiting for the perfect vintage. So, as you breathe in this fragrant history, remember, each ingredient in ancient Egyptian perfume had its own story, a journey from a distant land, a careful harvest, or a secret recipe. And all these scents blended together to create something much bigger than the sum of their parts. You're now stepping through the door of the ancient Egyptian perfumer's workshop, a place buzzing softly with the hum of focused creativity. The air inside is thick with layers of fragrantia, warm, resinous base mingling with sweet floral top notes. It's a sensory playground where oils drip slowly, powders dust the tables, and tiny glass vials clink in the quiet. This workshop isn't just a lab, it's a sanctuary where the magic of scent is carefully crafted and perfected. Perfume makers worked in small teams, each with a role. Some gathered and prepared ingredients, others crushed flowers or harvested resins, while the master perfumer carefully mixed and balanced the aromas. You can almost see their hands moving with practiced precision, grinding frankincense and blending oils. Their noses finely attuned to the subtle differences in smell that most of us wouldn't even notice. The workshop was often tucked away in the bustling parts of towns, near marketplaces but shielded from the sun's harsh glare. This helped preserve delicate ingredients and maintain stable conditions for the mixtures. Jars of resins, dried flowers, and powders lined the shelves, alongside bowls of fragrant oils made by soaking petals or boiling herbs. You might chuckle imagining this as the ancient equivalent of your favorite hipster candle shop, but here, every scent had a purpose beyond ambiance. One intriguing detail. Historians still argue whether perfumers used standardized recipes or relied mostly on improvisation, guided by intuition and tradition. It seems likely that while some formulas were passed down, each batch could differ slightly based on available ingredients and the perfumer's own nose. Workshops were also sites of experimentation. A perfumer might try layering a rare spice with a common flower, or adjusting the simmering time for resin infusions to change the scent's intensity. These subtle variations required patience, after all. Some fragrances needed weeks or even months to mature. You'd also find various tools: stone mortars and pestles for grinding, delicate strainers for filtering, and clay or alabaster vessels to store the precious oils. The choice of container mattered. Some materials could react with oils, changing the fragrance, so perfumers had to be chemists of their time, understanding how to protect their creations. Scent testing was a delicate art. Perfume makers often dabbed oils on strips of papyrus or linen, sniffing carefully throughout the day to judge how the fragrance evolved. It's fun to think of them as early perfumers with a kind of nose training certification, although obviously no formal diplomas existed. And just like any workshop, there were occasional mishaps. Too much of one resin might overpower a blend, or an accidental spill could ruin an entire batch. Still, these were small risks in pursuit of perfect balance. So next time you step into a perfumery or dab on your favorite scent, imagine the centuries-old workshop where this delicate craft was born, full of textures, scents, and skilled hands shaping what we now call perfume. You settle into the rhythm of ancient perfume-making techniques, watching as the delicate dance of extraction unfolds. Ancient Egyptians didn't have modern distillers or chemical labs, but they had ingenious ways to capture the essence of plants and resins. You'll find yourself marveling at the patience and subtlety involved. No instant gratification here, just slow alchemy. One of the main methods was enfleurage, a process so gentle it almost feels like coaxing fragrance from a flower's soul. Here, fresh petals were pressed into layers of odorless fat, which absorbed the scent over days or weeks. You might picture a perfumer patiently turning trays of fat, waiting for it to soak in the delicate aroma, kind of like slow cooking a perfume stew. After the scent was captured, the fat was washed with alcohol or another solvent to extract the fragrant oils. Enfleurage was especially useful for flowers, too delicate for heat-based extraction. Another popular technique was steam distillation, though historians still argue about how advanced Egyptians were with this method. The basic idea involved heating water to produce steam, which passed through plant material to vaporize volatile compounds. The vapor then condensed into liquid, separating aromatic oils from water. This method allowed for a purer, more concentrated fragrance than enfleurage. However, archaeological evidence for large-scale distillation devices from ancient Egypt remains sparse, leaving some debate about its use. Cold pressing was also in the mix, especially for citrus peels or certain seeds. Imagine the gentle squeezing of rinds, releasing their zesty oils without heat, preserving freshness. This method was less common but contributed to some unique scents. Extraction wasn't without its challenges. Resins like frankincense and myrrh required careful heating, not too hot to burn but warm enough to melt and release fragrance. Too much heat could spoil the scent, turning sweet aromas bitter or smoky. Balancing temperature was an art in itself. Perfume makers had to adjust techniques seasonally too. Higher summer heat could accelerate evaporation, so timing and storage became crucial to maintain quality. They also mixed methods, starting with enfleurage, followed by distillation or soaking to maximize scent extraction. A quirky fact: some perfumers reportedly used crocodile dung as a fermenting agent to enhance scent extraction, a practice that might sound off-putting today but made sense to them. Historians still debate whether this was a common technique or an isolated curiosity. So, while you're relaxing now, imagine the steady patience and sharp senses needed to coax perfumes from nature without any shortcuts, just skill, time, and a nose finely tuned to the faintest floral note. You glide from the practical world of crafting scents into the sacred realm where perfumes took on a divine aura. In ancient Egypt, fragrance wasn't just about smelling nice, it was an essential part of connecting with gods in the afterlife. As you imagine stepping into a sunlit temple, you notice the swirling smoke of incense curling around towering columns, the air thick with a scent meant to bridge earth and heaven. Perfumes were intimately tied to religious rituals. Priests anointed statues of gods and pharaohs with fragrant oils, believing the scents attracted divine presence and energized sacred spaces. The sweet aroma of myrrh, frankincense, and other resins was thought to cleanse the spirit and protect from evil forces. You might smile at the idea that the gods, if they had noses, probably preferred jasmine and lotus over today's colognes. The famous Book of the Dead, a collection of funerary spells, mentions numerous fragrant substances used to honor the deceased and ease their journey in the afterlife. Egyptians believed that perfume was a gift to the soul, ensuring a smooth passage and eternal comfort. Tombs often contained alabaster vessels filled with oils, so the dead could continue to enjoy the scents they loved. Imagine the quiet reverence in these rituals, a gentle layering of fragrance over solemn prayers. Historians still argue whether perfume use was mostly confined to temple rites or if it pervaded everyday worship. But there's no doubt that smell was a powerful spiritual symbol, a sensory link between the human and divine. Perfumed oils were also applied directly during ceremonious anointing the body as a sign of purity and blessing. Pharaohs wore special blends during coronations, reinforcing their sacred status. Even animals like cats and bulls, considered sacred, were sometimes scented for religious festivals. There's a quirky note here. Some temples kept secret recipes for sacred perfumes, guarded closely by priestly guilds. It's almost like the ancient world's version of secret sauce, but for incense. These blends could include rare ingredients like ambergris or exotic flowers, unavailable to common folk. As you breathe in the imagined temple air, you can almost hear whispered chants mingling with the soft crackle of burning incense, creating an immersive atmosphere where fragrance and faith merge seamlessly. So next time you light a candle or enjoy scented oils, remember that this calming ritual echoes an ancient belief that scent can touch something beyond the physical, carrying your spirit closer to the divine. You step out of the temple's hush and into the bustling streets of an ancient Egyptian town, where fragrance is no longer just sacred, it's part of everyday life. Perfumes here aren't reserved for kings or priests. Ordinary Egyptians use scents to freshen up, feel beautiful, and announce their social status, all while navigating the dusty realities of the Nile Valley. Personal hygiene in ancient Egypt was surprisingly advanced for its time, considering the hot climate and the Nile's mud-rich water. Perfumes helped mask odors caused by sweat or the lack of modern bathing facilities. You can almost imagine people dabbing fragrant oils on their wrists, necks, and even hair, kind of like the original version of eau de Nil. Daily applications of scented unguents and balms were as routine as brushing teeth is today. Women used perfumes not only for cleanliness but as part of their beauty rituals. You'd find them mixing fragrant oils with cosmetic powders or hair pomades, layering scents that hinted at their personality and allure. Men, too, enjoyed perfumes, often combining spicy and woody notes to evoke strength and sophistication. Social hierarchy was often scented, literally. Nobles and merchants flaunted elaborate perfume blends to signal wealth and refinement, while craftsmen and farmers used simpler, locally made oils. Wearing the right fragrance could open doors or mark one's place in society. It's like an ancient version of designer labels, but with a nose for nuance. Perfume also played a role in hospitality. Guests might be greeted with fragrant oils or incense, creating an atmosphere of warmth and welcome. Banquets and celebrations were punctuated by scented fumigations, enhancing the ambiance and marking the occasion as special. There's a fun fact here. Egyptians often scented their pets, especially cats, considered sacred and beloved. Perfumed collars or scented oils dabbed on fur were common proof that even furry friends were not exempt from the aroma game. Historians still debate how widespread perfume use was among the lower classes. Did everyone smell like a walking flower garden, or were scents mostly a luxury? It's likely the truth lies somewhere in between, depending on location, season, and means. So, as you lay back and breathe softly, imagine the scents weaving through markets, homes, and festivals, an invisible thread, binding ancient daily life in fragrant harmony. You now glide behind the ornate doors of a grand palace, where the perfume game is on a whole different level. Royalty didn't just dab on any fragrance, they had secret recipes, exclusive ingredients, and perfumers who operated like alchemists guarding precious formulas. Imagine the rich, velvety scents swirling through marble halls, creating an aura of power and mystery around the pharaohs. These royal blends often featured the rarest and most expensive ingredients: imported spices, exotic flowers, and precious resins reserved for nobility. Some were said to contain gold dust or crushed precious stones, not just for show, but believed to enhance the fragrance's potency. Perfumes became part of the pharaoh's image, symbolizing divine authority and eternal life. Perfume makers working in the court were trusted confidants, often sworn to secrecy. Sharing recipes with outsiders could mean severe punishment, because these blends were more than just luxury, they were political tools and status symbols. You might chuckle thinking about the ancient version of trade secrets, only far more fragrant. Historical texts hint at perfume recipes with dozens of ingredients, some still a mystery today. Scholars still argue about how much these formulas varied from one reign to another, or if certain scents marked specific ceremonies like coronations or funerals. Pharaohs themselves were often anointed with perfumes during rituals to reinforce their connection to the gods. You can picture them surrounded by attendants gently applying scented oils while chanting prayers. These ceremonies weren't just pomp. They reinforced the idea that the ruler was both human and divine, scented accordingly. Interestingly, Some royal perfumes were designed to last days, even weeks, on the skin, quite impressive given the desert heat. This required expert knowledge of fixatives and layering techniques, revealing that ancient perfumers were ahead of their time in fragrance science. And let's not forget the court ladies and nobles, who had their own secret collections of scents, sometimes rivaling the pharaohs. Perfume was a form of subtle competition, an olfactory fashion statement that said, "I belong here." So, next time you think of royal luxury, imagine it not only as glittering jewels, but also as invisible clouds of carefully crafted scent, marking power and prestige in the ancient world. You follow the winding paths of ancient trade routes, where perfumes and their precious ingredients journey far beyond Egypt's borders. Picture dusty caravans snaking through deserts, laden with jars of fragrant oils and sacks of exotic spices, an olfactory silk road that connected cultures and economies alike. Perfume wasn't just an art, it was a commodity, traded like gold or grain. The Nile River served as a crucial artery for transporting both raw materials and finished perfumes. Traders loaded boats with fragrant resins like frankincense and myrrh, heading north to bustling ports that linked Egypt with Mediterranean and Near Eastern markets. It's fascinating to imagine that some of the scents you enjoy today might have their roots in those ancient exchanges. Beyond the Nile, caravans braved the harsh Sahara, ferrying aromatic treasures from Arabia, East Africa, and India. These journeys were perilous and slow, with merchants relying on alliances with nomadic tribes for safe passage. The high value of perfume ingredients made them targets for bandits, adding an element of danger to their story. Perfumes themselves became diplomatic gifts, sealing alliances between rulers or marking special occasions. You might find it amusing to think that a vial of exotic fragrance could carry more political weight than an army's march. Historians still argue how much Egyptian perfume recipes were influenced by foreign blends, or if they maintained a distinctly local identity. Some evidence suggests a fascinating cross-pollination of ideas, with techniques and ingredients traveling along with goods. The demand for perfumes spurred economic networks, encouraging the cultivation of aromatic plants in Egypt and nearby lands. Some regions specialized in growing particular flowers or resins, supported by royal patronage. Interestingly, perfume containers also traveled these routes, fragile alabaster jars and early glass vessels that were as much treasures as their fragrant contents. The craftsmanship of these containers reflected the status of what they held, making the entire package a luxury. So, as you breathe deeply, think of perfume not just as a personal indulgence, but as a link in a vast ancient network where scent traveled across deserts and rivers, weaving connections in a world without planes or emails. You're now gently tracing your fingers along the smooth curves of an alabaster perfume jar, marveling at the artistry involved in crafting these delicate vessels. In ancient Egypt, perfume containers weren't just practical, they were miniature masterpieces designed to protect precious scents and display wealth and taste. Alabaster, a soft, translucent stone quarried near the Nile, was prized for its ability to keep oils cool and shield them from light, both essential for preserving fragile fragrances. Imagine artisans painstakingly carving slender bottles with narrow necks to minimize evaporation, each piece unique with subtle variations in shape and decoration. Glassmaking was another significant innovation. Though still rare and expensive during Egypt's earlier periods, glass containers began to emerge, often tinted and shaped into intricate forms. These vessels sometimes bore symbolic motifs, lotus flowers, scarabs, or hieroglyphs, turning them into both functional items and objects of beauty. Storage wasn't limited to bottles. Small boxes and alabaster palettes were also used to hold solid perfumes or scented pastes. These items might be ornately decorated, meant for personal use or as prestigious gifts. Historians still debate the extent to which container design influenced perfume quality versus its role as a status symbol. After all, a beautifully crafted jar was a visible sign of wealth and refinement, even if the scent inside was simple. Packaging also served a practical purpose. Seals and lids had to prevent contamination and spillage, especially when perfumes traveled long distances. Some jars were sealed with resin or wax, ensuring the scent remained intact over time. You might chuckle picturing a noble accidentally dropping their alabaster bottle, shattering both the container and their social standing simultaneously. Fragile as they were, these containers became treasured heirlooms, sometimes buried with their owners to accompany them into the afterlife. So, the next time you admire a fancy perfume bottle on your dresser, remember its ancestora hand-carved alabaster jar, crafted with care to hold the essence of ancient beauty and luxury. You're now stepping into a bustling marketplace, where the scents of spices, flowers, and oils mingle in a fragrant symphony, and the role of gender in perfume use comes into gentle focus. In ancient Egypt, scent was more than personal hygiene. It was a subtle language expressing identity, social role, and even gender. Women embraced perfume as an essential part of their beauty rituals. You can imagine them carefully layering floral and sweet scents over skin and hair, not only to attract admirers but also to signify status and femininity. Some oils were blended specifically for women, incorporating soft jasmine or rose to enhance delicate charm. Men, on the other hand, favored woodier, spicier aromas, think frankincense or myrrh mixed with warm spices. These scents conveyed strength, vitality, and a connection to the divine. It wasn't just about smelling nice, it was about projecting power and confidence in a society where image mattered deeply. Children, too, were scented, often with gentler blends to protect and soothe. Perfume was part of care rituals, believed to ward off illness and evil spirits. You might find it amusing that babies could be just as fragrant as their elders, wrapped in layers of aromatic oils. Historians still debate how rigid these scent preferences were. Some evidence points to fluidity, with certain perfumes worn by both genders depending on occasion or personal taste. It's safe to say that fragrance was a versatile form of expression, adapting to individual and social needs. There was also a spiritual aspect. Perfumes used in daily life echoed those in religious ceremonies, blurring lines between earthly identity and divine favor. Wearing a particular scent might link someone symbolically to a god or goddess, subtly reinforcing their role in the cosmic order. You might smile knowing that ancient Egyptians cared so much about scent that they even scented their pet cats, being the most famous. A perfumed collar was the ancient equivalent of a luxury pet accessory. So, as you settle deeper into this fragrant world, think about how scent gently wove itself through identity, culture, and belief, marking men, women, and children with invisible yet powerful signatures. You inhale deeply and now find yourself in the more curious corners of ancient Egyptian perfumery, where unusual ingredients and intriguing myths mingle. Some of these components might raise an eyebrow today, but back then, they were part of a broader belief system that connected scent to health, magic, and the supernatural. One of the most eyebrow-raising additives was crocodile dung. Yes, you heard that right. Perfume makers sometimes used it as a fermenting agent or a binding material to extract or stabilize fragrances. While this might sound repulsive to modern noses, it made sense in their chemical experimentation. Historians still debate whether crocodile dung was a common practice or an isolated curiosity, but its mention pops up in ancient texts and recipes. Imagine the courage or desperation it took to try this method. Alongside such quirky ingredients were animal products like musk and ambergris, valued for their strong, lasting scents. These came from distant lands and animals rarely seen by most Egyptians, adding an aura of mystery and luxury to perfumes. It's almost like having a rare spice that only kings and queens could taste. Myths also played a significant role in how these ingredients were perceived. For example, blue lotus wasn't just a flower but a symbol of rebirth and divine beauty, and its scent was thought to induce gentle trance states. Perfumes weren't simply about smell, they were talismans, believed to influence mood, health, and even the soul's journey. There's also evidence that perfumers saw themselves as intermediaries between humans and gods, with their scents acting as a kind of magic. Some formulas included ingredients believed to ward off evil spirits or attract good fortune, blending olfactory art with spiritual practice. You might smile at the ancient openness to experimenting, trying everything from floral essences to, well, animal droppings in the pursuit of the perfect scent. It reminds us that science and superstition often walked hand in hand. So as you breathe in this mix of the familiar and the strange, remember that ancient Egyptian perfume makers weren't just artisans, they were pioneers navigating the mysterious intersection of nature, belief, and sensory delight. You lean into the quiet hum of the ancient workshop once more, noticing how the perfume makers, those early chemists of their time, learned through trial and error to master their craft. Without modern labs or textbooks, they developed a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of how to blend, preserve, and amplify sense and intuitive science born from centuries of careful observation. Imagine them meticulously recording which flowers paired well with which resins, noticing that certain mixtures lasted longer on the skin while others faded quickly. Their experiments weren't random, they tracked outcomes closely, learning the delicate balance between volatility and fixatives. This hands-on knowledge laid the groundwork for many perfume principles still used today. They also figured out that temperature control was critical. Heat could unlock essential oils, but too much could destroy delicate notes. So, they practiced gentle heating, or used cool infusions to preserve freshness. This knowledge wasn't just practical, it was almost alchemical, blending art with proto-science. Perfume makers were part botanists, part apothecaries, and part artists. They understood that scent was more than smell, it was an experience, a memory, a mood. Their blends might include bitter, sweet, spicy, and earthy tones, carefully orchestrated to create complex fragrances that evolved over time. Historians still debate how much of this knowledge was shared openly versus kept secret within guilds or families. Some recipes passed down through generations, while others vanished with their creators, lost to time and politics. Interestingly, some perfumers also experimented with adding substances to improve scent longevity, such as beeswax or animal fats. These early fixatives helped fragrances cling to the skin longer, an important breakthrough given Egypt's heat. You might chuckle picturing an ancient perfumer proudly presenting a new blend, only to find the villagers wrinkling their noses at a scent that was a little too experimental. So, as you relax now, think of these pioneers, brave, curious, and patient, whose tireless trial and error shaped a fragrant legacy still alive in modern perfumes. You settle in as the story turns to one of the most puzzling challenges for ancient Egyptian perfumers, keeping fragrances fresh and stable under the relentless desert sun. Imagine the dry heat baking the workshops and homes, threatening to evaporate precious oils or alter their delicate balance. The quest to preserve scent was as vital as the art of blending itself. Egyptians developed clever strategies to slow scent degradation. Storage in alabaster jars, with their cool, light-blocking qualities, was one part of the solution. These containers helped protect oils from sunlight and temperature swings, acting like tiny refrigerators for fragrances. It's fun to imagine them as the ancient version of luxury packaging, functional and elegant. Perfume makers also layered scents with fixatives, substances that slowed evaporation and helped the fragrance last longer on the skin. Natural fixatives included resins like benzoin and labdanum, sticky substances that bound volatile oils. Sometimes beeswax or animal fats were added to create scented pastes or balms, offering a longer-lasting aromatic experience. They also timed the collection and processing of ingredients carefully. Certain flowers and resins were harvested at specific times of day or year to capture peak fragrance potency. This seasonal sensitivity shows a deep connection with nature's rhythms, something modern perfumers still observe. Historians still argue about the full extent of ancient Egyptians' chemical understanding in this area. Some evidence suggests they had a surprisingly sophisticated grasp of the molecular stability of scents, even if unarticulated in modern scientific terms. Another challenge was transporting perfumes over long distances without spoilage. Sealing jars with resin or wax helped, but the journey remained risky. It's fascinating to think that ancient traders and perfumers were early pioneers in supply chain management just for fragrance. You might smile, picturing the patience and care required, as a perfumer delicately seals each jar, knowing a single mistake could mean a ruined batch and lost fortune. So, as you inhale the imagined scent of a perfectly preserved perfume, Consider the ancient wisdom and innovation that made it possible keeping beauty intact against the desert's harsh test. You drift now toward the twilight of ancient Egypt's perfume traditions, where the fragrant art slowly transformed, faded, and spread its influence far beyond the Nile. As dynasties shifted and empires rose and fell, perfume making faced challenges, political upheaval, changing trade routes, and new cultures, yet its legacy endured in unexpected ways. The decline of native Egyptian perfume workshops is tied partly to the arrival of Greek and Roman powers, who brought their own scent customs. While Egyptians remained proud of their aromatic heritage, new techniques and ingredients began to blend with old traditions. You might imagine a perfumer hesitating, holding a precious jar of myrrh while watching foreign traders introduce new scents from the Mediterranean. Historians still debate how much Egyptian perfume practices were preserved intact versus adapted or supplanted by later cultures. Some suggest that Egyptian recipes influenced Roman perfumery directly, while others argue that Egyptian influence was absorbed more subtly through trade and cultural exchange. The Mediterranean became a melting pot of fragrance traditions, with Egyptian ingredients prized for their quality. Frankincense and myrrh continued their journey, now essential in Christian rituals and Roman baths, tying ancient Egyptian scent culture to new spiritual and social landscapes. Meanwhile, Egypt's own perfume industry struggled to maintain its former glory amid economic and political shifts. Yet, even as traditional workshops declined, the symbolic power of fragrance remained strong in Egyptian society. You might find it poetic that the perfumes once used to anoint pharaohs and gods found new life centuries later, inspiring scents still celebrated today. It's a fragrant thread weaving through history's tapestry, fragile but persistent. So, as you relax deeper into this story, picture the last wafts of ancient Egyptian perfume, soft, fading but leaving an indelible scent on the world's cultural memory. You now inhale the final traces of ancient Egypt's fragrant past, noticing how its legacy still perfumes modern life in surprising ways. The artistry, ingredients, and rituals of those ancient perfumers echo through time, influencing today's perfumes, rituals, and cultural appreciation of scent. Modern perfumers often seek inspiration in Egyptian motifs, bottles shaped like lotus blossoms, scents featuring frankincense and myrrh, and marketing that evokes the mystery of the Nile. You might smile knowing that when you buy a pharaoh-inspired perfume today, you're participating in a tradition thousands of years old. Even spiritual and wellness practices incorporate Egyptian aromatic principles. Aromatherapy's emphasis on natural oils and the mood-altering power of scent owes a nod to those temple rituals and daily applications. Some modern rituals mimic ancient practices of anointing and incense, linking past and present through scent. Perfume museums and collectors treasure ancient vessels and recipes, piecing together lost blends. Some experimental perfumers recreate ancient scents from surviving texts, offering a glimpse into long-gone olfactory worlds. Historians still argue about how close modern recreations come to the originals, given missing ingredients and incomplete records. But the fascination with Egypt's perfume heritage remains strong, bridging archaeology, chemistry, and art. As you breathe deeply now, you might imagine the blue lotus and frankincense rising once more, carrying whispers of pharaohs and priests, perfumers and pilgrims. The essence of ancient Egypt lives on in every carefully crafted scent. So, as you drift towards sleep, let these fragrant echoes calm your mind, reminders of human creativity, connection, and the simple, timeless joy of a beautiful scent. Now, as the scents of ancient Egypt gently fade from your mind, let your breathing slow and soften. Imagine the warm desert night, where the stars twinkle softly above the Nile, and the cool breeze carries whispers of lotus and myrrh. There's a calmness here, a stillness wrapped in fragrant memories like a lullaby sung across millennia. The ancient perfumers, with their patient hands and keen noses, remind us of a time when beauty was woven from nature's gifts and careful craft. Their legacy is not just in bottles or formulas, but in the quiet moments when scent stirs a memory or soothes a restless soul. Let your thoughts drift, as if floating on a gentle river, carrying the essence of flowers, spices, and sacred resins. Feel the weight of the day lift, replaced by the tender embrace of night and the promise of peaceful rest. And as sleep draws near, know that you carry a piece of this fragrant history with you, a reminder that even in the simplest pleasures, there's a story waiting to be told. Sweet dreams.